Welcome, colleagues, to this public board meeting. This is partway through a full day of action-packed activities. Glad already you've had the chance to meet up with some of the right charity people out there. Later on today will be the marketplace for the AGM. I'm very hopeful that everybody will be able to carve out some proper time to spend time with colleagues from across the trust, seeing what they're doing. We've also, straight after this public board, we've got the private board. As has become the custom, there's a lot more that's going through public board than private board. That's something we've been welcoming. But there'll be one or two items where we'll flag them up here that have more in-depth discussion in private, and I'll signal them as we go along. We finished today with our AGM with the governors. So a full day, and thank you all for joining. Can I just check? Apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Veronica Stoner and Steve McKinley.
Okay, thank you. No others, that's fine. Declarations of interest, anything new? No? Any other businesses, any you need to notify me of? No? This agenda's got some good, juicy stuff in it, so we'll have plenty of nice stuff to discuss as we go through. The minutes of the last meeting, the 22nd of May, they look fine to me. Anybody got any issues they want to raise from them? That's great. And the action log is satisfactorily green. Two of the items were due for now, but we've shoved them back to September because of time pressures. All okay with the action log? Then as we go into the CEO's update, just to remind you colleagues, this is public board, we're being filmed, and you'll recall that I have aspirations for these videos to go viral. They don't quite do that yet, but we do get a few hundred people along that, and that's great. And I hope Ross in due course will get regular reports showing an upward trend. But that depends on how exciting you guys manage to make it. I look forward to finding out. Let's go straight into, here's the first test. Bijou.
Okay, I'm not sure quite that I'll manage viral, but we'll have a go. So this is the Chief Exec's dashboard, and you'll see from the dashboard that we continue to make strong progress in terms of our operational performance and our finances. There are probably a few things to highlight, which is probably under the progress update element. So we've got a continued focus in terms of trying to deliver our operational performance, but that's not to the national standards, that's to try and push back to the constitutional standards, and teams continue to work really hard in trying to manage that on a particular basis, being around the importance of time and how time is very precious for our patients and for our staff, and where we can reduce that time of waiting, that being really important. We have continued our capital investment, so we'll see through the financial report as well the value that we're putting into that. And our planning for winter is also well underway, so we will formalise today our winter plans. Over the next couple of months thereafter, we'll work through how we operationalise all of this, but the core principles around our winter plan have been agreed. We've now got a shared chair, so you'll remember we've gone through a process whereby our governors have elected, our governors, Newcastle and Gateshead, have elected to have a shared chair. Welcome to Paul, and that's good now that that has been finalised, and we continue to work through with our alliance partners just on a number of elements which we'll present this evening at the AGM about progress, about how the alliance is working. I did want to touch on a couple of other quick things, so to highlight, and this will come out in more detail next week through league tables, our rating in terms of our segmentation. So under the National Operational Framework, we are in segment 1, which is the highest segment that we can be in. That has real benefit for us as an organisation. It's You can see on the back of that how it's been on our performance, both from a safety, quality, HR, finance metrics that has put us into that domain. It does allow us some new freedoms that we'll be exploring over time. On the 21st of July, I think, is when the league tables will be released in the public domain, and that will identify where each individual organisation nationally sits in the ranking. We also continue our strong working relationships with both primary care and both of our councils, and that is in particular as we move into the next chapter of our lifelong care strategy. So working with a real focus around frailty and respiratory, which is the areas that we have collectively identified, and that fits very much in line with the release of the 10-year plan that happened a couple of weeks ago. And we continue to work on what that means for us as an organisation, both in terms of some of the outline that's happening around the development of neighbourhoods, but also in terms of integrated healthcare organisations. It's probably worth me also mentioning that we have underway currently today and tomorrow our Band 2, Band 3 strikes for our healthcare assistants. They're currently underway, which is to reassure everybody that our services remain safe for all of our patients. Kate may want to come in a little bit on that later on. I wasn't going to mention anything else, Chairman, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We may cover more on the strike in private board. Any questions or comments to Bijou? Good, then thank you. And it's still Bijou because this is another item we'll do in 2 bites, the 10-year plan, which is going to reshape a lot of the way we think and plan in the years ahead. There will be some discussions in private board because there are some potential commercial sensitivities at work here, so some issues we'll want to talk about in private board initially before bringing back proposals to public. But Bijou, you want to give us a flavour?
Yeah, so for those of you that had the opportunity to read the plan, I think when you first read it, you sit back and you go, wow, there's a lot of ambition in there. It does take you into and now what? How do we turn this into a reality? And I think nationally they've now said quite clearly there's not a rule book, there's not an operational plan around how this is turned into a reality, which in itself I think is really exciting because it puts the onus back on us as organisations, as providers, and providers in the wider sense to say how do we turn some of this into a reality. For us, I think we are well placed in terms of our long-standing relationships with our key partners, particularly primary care and both of our councils, to really try and see how we shift our model of care. So the three shifts that have been well trailed in the press around moving on to digital, from sickness to prevention, hospital to community, they run throughout the plan as expected. And I think now we're starting to move into, with our partners, discussing how we turn some of this into a reality. So I would be saying watch this space. You'll see it come up under our lifelong care strategy where a lot of this falls into play with our clinical teams. I think there's more to come, so let's see where this lands.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good initial intro. Anybody want to raise any questions here? As I say, we'll be digging into it rather more in private board later on today. There's no great surprises. The key themes were ones I think we knew about beforehand. There's a few extra details, but the direction of travel was very familiar to us in the Trust and it's very consistent with our lifelong care strategy. Then let's start getting into some of the meaty bits. The winter plan, Simon, just to clarify first of all, in September we will need to approve winter plan in some detail. There's a pro forma that's been produced by the department with quite a lot of detail that we will, as a board, need to sign off. That's not what we're doing today. We're getting more of the overview. So I'm not actually quite clear whether now, Bijou, whether we're required to approve this today or whether to receive this and approve the formal plan when it comes to us in September.
I think today we need to approve this because the plan in September, the requests of the National Board Assurance Framework, have elements in it like our participation in the big national September resilience planning exercise. So there's some elements that will have to come through in September we can't approve today. Today is the approval of the plan to date. The operational elements will come back in September and will need to be ticked off against the Board Assurance Framework.
That's fine, so we'll tell you what we're going to be doing today, and over to you. So,
Thank you, yes. So, just turn your mic off.
oh, sorry.
So this essentially is what we do every year. Every year we've always been ahead of anywhere else by having a winter plan and by having a winter plan before we're out to go on summer holidays. Is basically the way we've always thought about it. So I'm not going to go through, there's a dozen or so slides in here. The actual winter plan that's been collated, it's got a lot more details per business unit. It gets into 40 odd slides long, and that's been to SQ&I last week, and various other settings through the last few months, all of the local teams, business unit, CPG, board development, etc. So in great summary, our objective really is to try and be as prepared as we can be. We know that winter in particular, but any day in healthcare can throw things at us, but the more prepared we are, the more we're able to manage those issues. Our constant priority is patient safety, and just trying to, we can't reduce risk, but we can manage risk in a positive way and just make sure that we're addressing that as best as possible. We know we've been monitoring very closely over the last few months the corridor care, and that remains very high on our measure, both for the challenge of the people who are having corridor care and also as a very, very acute indicator of how we're doing. And we've normalised essentially the winter pressure reviews now, looking back over a couple of months of the most significant pressures and learning as much as we can from those and assuring ourselves and our clinical teams that we did what we needed to do and learn what we need to do differently. We are always, our staff and teams are the people that get us through this, always, and they did last winter. And so we're looking at, we're constantly trying to do, think about well-being and how we're getting recuperation at this time of year. This will come back as we talk about strikes and other sorts of things, because they're going to sap people at the times where they should be trying to get some rest and resilience. And there's a big push on flu vaccination for staff as well. And then the usual things around trying to continue to strengthen and nurture our relationships with partners, not just for the potential future of the 10-year plan, but just the practical and day-to-day working, how much we rely on each other, and an overall aim that we're stating to our teams and to ourselves that we aim to maintain our elective and non-elective work throughout. We can scale them up and down as needed to be, but we should be not looking to turn anything off. And we've taken an inference from the urgent and emergency care plan essentially and started to think about, okay, what is it we just need to do every day that is just good running? What is it we need to do extra at winter? And what do we need to do? And this is a new level of consideration in our plan really. What do we need to do in those times of very high pressure and have a super response at that point? And so we're going to be monitoring these things over time. Some of it is looking at what's happening elsewhere, and Bijou and Alistair and others have talked before about how the flu rates in Australia can be very predictive for us, and certainly last year predicted a difficult flu winter, and that absolutely was the case. It's looking a lot better this year at the moment, and using all the markers we have, and being, again, clearer to our teams essentially about what we're doing to make sure we're monitoring what is happening. All of this, none of this is new, but it's just being more explicit about what's happening alongside our usual monitoring and all the things that we turn on and off to try and monitor, improve and manage how things are working. And then this was a slide that has still got potential in it, actually. Subsequent to submission, and we're facing the reality at the moment of a period of industrial action with healthcare assistants and the anticipated industrial action next weekend with junior doctors. And as we said, we're going to do whatever we need to do, but it's the last thing we needed because it's morale and goodwill that gets us through, and these things sap those. So I'm not going to go through all of the plans in any detail. I'm happy to answer any questions. This is medicines, it's just the first one that came up, but and this is the very high level summary, but separating out those things around what we're trying to do anyway that we just need to improve, what we're going to do additional for winter, and the very high pressure and what we would turn on in those sorts of situations. Unapologetically, we did a bit of a conversation about whether we need really precise triggers, and certainly across the business unit, people have got different style on that. That's absolutely fine. That's what they understand their business. But certainly in medicine, there are so many different things that can be happening, and pressure can be in different settings. Often they impact together, but not always. And so we are having a nuanced approach to that. We'll measure what's happening where and address it as needed. So that's probably as far as I was going to go with me talking, unless people have got any questions.
Thank you very much. Just a second. Yeah. First of all, thank you. That's really clear, and I think all can see how the issues that were raised in broad development and indeed in SQ and I have been reflected. Take comments. So I've got one just question to kick off on the Australia data. My reading of it at the moment is, whilst it looks like we might not get a peak, the actual levels early in the season were much higher than they normally are. And if that does translate over, does that mean we're going to have to expect a higher than normal but not massive peak in October, November, December, but not such a horrendous peak in December than previously?
I've got two professors of Australian flu either side of me, but my take on it would be, I think we still need to wait another month or so and just see kind of what the pattern was. There was an assurance it was really flat, and then it went up a little bit, and then it seems to have turned a bit of a corner, but we need to wait it out. If you look at that and you get an idea of how worried you are at the moment, I'm not there. The only thing I'm superstitious about is saying, anything about what's going to happen in healthcare. So I'm not going to say it, but it's not overly worrying at the moment. We can potentially overanalyze it, but we will continue to analyse it and get some sense of that.
Can I just get the professor's view as well?
Probably the first time I've been called that. Better than Mystic Meg. But I think Simon's entirely right that we do need probably 3 months to show. It certainly doesn't indicate it's going to be an early peak, which it can in previous years. If anything, it would be, given the trajectory, if we do see a peak, it's going to be later rather than earlier, because we would have had it by now anyway. But we probably need another 6 weeks worth of data.
Jeremy?
Yeah. What colour am I? No, so, fingers crossed. I think flu probably isn't likely to be our issue, but I am concerned about industrial action. Some very keen-eyed individual has pointed out Christmas strike activity, because I think we do. I think my understanding of how we'll need to resilience test the plan is to think about all of the realistic possibilities that are there. And of that, I think there is a looming threat. Whether I really hope it won't prove to be the case, but strike action.
I'd still like to give us a bit more time for that in private board, if that's okay. Yeah. Good. I've got Margaret.
Thank you, Simon, and obviously the team for developing the plan. I was just wondering about when we'll be in a position to share the plan with our partners, particularly NIAS and the local authority in Newcastle, and will they share their plans with us?
So I guess our plan is public as of today. It's going to public board, and we've not been at all backward about sharing it. What I think we would aim to do would be we haven't got a tradition of necessarily certainly sharing plans in that kind of way. The national stuff might change that a little bit, we'll see what what will be a regional resilience event puts out. But we will be using it in the conversations we have with all of those partners. So in an informal way.
Thank you, Katie.
Just thank you for the plan. Margaret's just picked up on the point that I was going to raise, because I think it's really key. If our plan is really strong, but if our partners' plans aren't as robust, then it is going to put barriers on us achieving this. So just to understand more about what we're doing to make sure that resilience. But thank you.
Good. So that concept of sharing, we're all up for. Chris.
Yeah, just to say that elements of our plan have been shared through the Lab B, which is part of the ICB. So we have a winter planning meeting with them tomorrow morning, where those Lab B plans from across the ICB are being discussed, and so our plans have been shared in that format.
Yeah, and just to add, the 3 tiers there in terms of big planning for business as usual, planning for winter pressure and very severe winter stroke industrial action or anything else. That was a change to the national guidance this year, so we're very much in line with how nationally they were trying to present this, and I think that's been helpful, because when we get into that very severe pressure, the conversation is more around what are you going to do that's different as opposed to just more of the same. We have had a discussion with both of our local councils as well in terms of if we end up in that very severe pressure, so they know these triggers now, so that if we end up in those very severe pressures, are they able to respond in a very different way to what we would normally respond? So that's been good working as well, but I guess that would be fed through, as Chris has alluded through the Lab Bs, which are responsible for holding winter plans across the patch.
Thank you, Ruth.
As Simon rightly pointed out, this is very staff dependent, isn't it? We are in a position where we're in strike mode, and it does slightly worry me. But I'm also just want a bit of assurance, want a bit of assurance that most of these plans do talk about stepping up staff numbers, putting extra shifts in. Are we financially prepared for that, Paul? Is that, because we've got challenging CIP targets that are often linked to staff numbers and use of bank and agency, and how comfortable are we about our financial status in this?
I've been very, very assured. I think when we presented the budgets to Trust Board previously, we do have resilience within our position should we need it during winter. All the CIP plans borne in mind the potential pressures we might face, so they will be sensitive to any change in conditions, etc.
Thank you. Who's next? Simon.
Can I just expand that as well? I think what we had a very good go at practice last winter, which was very difficult, and we needed to draft people in for that. So what we have been trying to do is work out how we plan to do that, which is if we're job planning it in, if we do it in an organised way, it's going to cost us less. So in a very odd way, we broke the bank last year, and what we're trying to do is just break it a bit less this year as well. But depending where we get to, there will be some implications. But it also there's a kind of an understanding of that, and also we're trying our best to try it. Then that's where we're getting there. That the additional senior decision maker may not be an extended shift. It might be distracting your day a bit early, come in at 3 rather than at 4 for your evening round, and let's put an extra hour in at that point rather than do an extra expensive hour, and expensive to your life as well by staying even more into the evening.
Thank you. Any more? One of the issues that came up in board development that you referenced is the different type of triggers for each department. I just wanted to check with the board. There's a flexible approach that Simon and colleagues have taken. In some areas there's a fairly specific trigger, in others it remains a little bit more subjective because there's so many factors. I think that makes sense, but I'm looking for endorsement of that, and I'm seeing nods around the room, so that's pretty comfortable. Any more comments before I ask us to consider whether we're going to approve this outline winter plan? Then, first of all, we like it, and congratulations to colleagues who've been involved in it. We're conscious that the potential for industrial action has the potential to make this very much more difficult at every level, particularly in terms of morale. We're keen, though, for us to be open in sharing this more widely across colleagues. We've received assurance that the potential financial implications are ones that we can manage without hauling ourselves underwater. And in September we will receive also the more operational details for approval prior to submission to the department. And with that, I'm asking for your approval of the plan. Just looking, I'm seeing nods around the room. So thank you very much indeed. That was terrific stuff. Ross, public perception. This could be a really depressing report, but actually it's not really, is it? So over to you.
No, I hope not, Chair. We've discussed this. Sorry, I think that's not. Yeah, we've discussed it in a few different forums, haven't we? But I thought it was important to have a board mention to note some of the findings, especially given the national context. I'm sure you've seen the media coverage around the British Society Attitude Survey, which talks about public perception and the importance of public confidence in the NHS generally. And then you'll have seen Jim talking at Confed about this sort of watershed moment around that national perception being at the lowest point ever, sort of around 21%. So it feels like a really good temperature gauge of where we are locally. I think the bits to celebrate are that I don't think many of the trusts, if any, are able to capture this level of data and the speed of the data. And then secondly, the levels of satisfaction. So the report found this time 79% of people in our patch are satisfied with the services we provide, and a significant proportion of those felt they'd improved over the past 5 years. So that's a real difference from some of the national stuff we see out there. I think there's loads of other positive things in there around optimism and around some of the initiatives and some of the direct experience people have when they use our services as well. So a lot to be kind of proud and happy about in terms of the frontline services. I think we know from the Stafford rituals when we talked a little bit about what the public are saying to staff, it had a real impact on morale as well. You know, there's lots of negativity in the world generally, but to be able to say, well, a really high proportion of our public think you're doing a very good job had a noticeable effect on staff and what went around the patch. It's also a good tool for learning, so we're taking the findings of this as a much more detailed report from the independent company who provided it for us. We're meeting with business units individually to talk about some of the issues that were raised there. And I think while there were some areas that were consistent around there, things like waiting times, appointment availability, some rural inequalities, it's the things that we're aware of and that we're working really hard to try and address. So there was a lot of reassurance in that we're looking at the same things and trying to tackle the same problems. And that, a little bit later on, I think we've got the Regulation 17 report, and we've triangulated some of the our local health watch data last week, and again it's those similar issues. So it feels like there's some good data and some good learning for us to understand what the issues that people are facing. So overall, I think really impressive and really good result for us, with some learning along the way and some targeted initiatives that we're in hopefully tackle in the future.
Can you turn yourself off? Very good, thank you. Anybody want to raise comments or questions? Richard and then Margaret. And then Maria. That's right.
Yeah, they're Richard. So the bit that caught my attention there, which was very interesting, was that the virtual application attendees were significantly more likely to be dissatisfied, which feels very unfortunate because you sort of feel virtual applications ought to be a way to go if it's the right experience in the right way. So will we get some deep dive data out of this that we can look at and perhaps sort of plot a way forward?
We're definitely looking at that, and you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things when we explore it a bit more, I think probably the language we used wasn't quite right. So I think there was a bit of confusion between virtual appointments and virtual ward. So we've been looking at that and thinking about how we address that. We're going to be, when we talk about virtual ward, fine internally, but we're going to call that hospital at home externally. In terms of the satisfaction, I think when we looked down into the detail of it, it was sometimes people weren't satisfied because they didn't feel that was the appropriate one. It wasn't that they didn't, where something was appropriate virtually, they were quite happy. So we have got more data on that, and there's a big section that we're sort of analysing now And I think it was some of it was about appropriateness and not just the blanket, we don't like virtual at all, because lots of the rural communities felt that that was a good access point for, you know, we had a good case study of a chap who had to travel the North Tyneside very, very regularly and actually was able to do it virtually, made his life much easier. So definitely an area for us to look at.
Margaret.
Richard very eloquently asked the same question I was going to ask, and Ross actually gave a really good explanation. It'd be really good to come back to that, because I do think there's the language that we've used with individuals, because you would have assumed that would see a great satisfaction rate with that type of service. So look forward to further information. So thank you.
Thank you. Maria.
Thank you for that report. One is a question or an opportunity, and the other is a comment in response to the questions raised by Richard and Margaret. The opportunity is around the distance from hospitals, which flagged up as something that some people found was a concern. But on the flip side of that, on the other side, a lot of people are open to receiving care outside of hospital settings. So it looks like that's an opportunity to marry those things up very nicely, and that fits in with the 10-year plan perfectly. So that's one, and I'd love to see how that comes out in future iterations of the feedback from patients. In response to the virtual element, that's just something that comes up quite a bit in my clinical life, where we offer a virtual appointment faster than a real face-to-face appointment. I say real face-to-face appointment, and time and again, parents turn them down because they want to come in. And in old money, back home, they would say, I want someone to sound my chest. They want someone to put that stethoscope on the chest to make them feel that they've had some kind of a once-over, if you like. And I don't know how much of that is perception, how much of that is just tradition, or something about the way we communicate what we're trying to achieve in the appointment and what they, as the recipients, would like to get out of the appointment. So maybe they do want a once-over because they haven't been able to get to the GP. But all of that needs to be teased out, and it's a bit hard to do that at a high level.
Do you want to respond to someone on that?
I think you've hit the nail on the head exactly, and I think what you see is right. We have got the data split by age and things as well, and lots of different variables. So we're looking at that, and I do think there is definitely an element of people, some demographics just want to see somebody, the whites of their eyes, and see them face to face. So I think you're right, and some of it will be communicated, but not all. I don't think some of it's experiential.
And there will be variations between different clinics as well. I think that's always more the case in paediatrics than in many other services. Joan.
Yeah, it was really just to add to that, because we've obviously got our new Northumbria patient charter, and we've just done a baseline survey of over 1,100 patients, and I think exactly what everyone's been talking about with the virtual appointments, we've talked to patients about a choice, and that's the bottom line. I think is for people is the patient-centeredness, is having the choice. That's what they've told us. So that might again provide some more explanation. And I think again some of the things we've been talking about are very much part of the charter, the measurement that we're doing, and that drive for improvement to improve some of those areas that we're talking about today.
Ishan? Oh, sorry. Then just one question for me. I recall over the 2 years I've been chair, I've every now and again raised whether we should be going more on the front foot talking about our successes. And the pushback has regularly been, well, we do quite a lot of that, but we don't want to appear too arrogant, we don't want to appear too competitive in relation to colleagues in other trusts, the more you proclaim that we're wonderful, the more you open this up to the challenges where inevitably we're not 100% wonderful across the piece. I'm just wondering whether actually we've reached a different point where the crisis that Jim's identified nationally means that actually we will have a responsibility to step up and start putting the more positive messages about the successes of the NHS. And I wonder if that's a question for discussion, maybe somewhere else initially. But what your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's always a balance, and I think talking about some of the positive stuff today, and then we've heard some of the not so positive a little bit earlier on. So it's always a balance. I think one of the ways, and certainly don't take all the credit for it, but one of the things that's been a real is a perception survey. So it's not about what people generally experience, it's about what they think and what they hear and what they read. And a lot of that is because that we're constantly pushing out, this pipeline of local positive case studies, and for me the positive bit is that people do see a lot of that the sort of more negative stuff hasn't leaked in, and in fact it's got a bit better over time. So there's always room for improvement, completely agree, and I think there is a line between being a bit too hubristic but also really celebrating those positive local stories that people respond to well.
Peter?
I think there's also, so like Ross, there's a balance. We've tried internally in particular from a staff morale point of view of just going back out to staff and making sure they understand what they hear in the public domain, particularly the press, particularly around the the phrase that was used about the NHS being broken, that's what you might hear, but it is different here, and these are the reasons why. So it's not just us saying, we're not broken, but it's actually look at all of our metrics, look at all of our measures that we have in place, and actually we're doing really well. But as always, there's always more we can do, so we will never sit back and be complacent and think we've got it all sorted, which we won't have. But it's just about the fact that place, our starting point is different, and being very explicit to our staff that that's the case. I think when we did the staff roadshows, the comments that came back were very much around, well, haven't realised that. So I think that bit is really important.
Okay, so good report, a lot of encouragement. We focus, as we normally do, on the areas for improvement that arise out of it, and there's something about the language we're using around virtual appointments and virtual hospitals and virtual wards, and I've always preferred hospital at home. So let's keep on thinking about the language in this, but let's also think about how we can promote the benefits of virtual appointments, recognising Maria's very valid point that many people will still want the choice of having it, but if they understand that the choice includes you can get a virtual appointment the day after tomorrow, but the face-to-face appointment might be 3 weeks off, that might start to change the tone of it. We've discussed, but I think we haven't kind of resolved whether we should be moving more onto the front foot. I think we've had encouragement that the front foot work has already been having a benefit for our staff morale, and that's very positive. So thanks very much indeed. Let's move on to the people and organisational development strategy that we're being asked to receive. Kate.
Thank you. So I just want to caveat this actually before I start, because this was produced prior to the 10-year plan being released. Helpfully there is a lot of alignment, but there are a couple of areas in the 10-year plan that we now need to weave into this strategy, so it will change as a result of today for the next 3 years. So areas such as the 10-year plan talks about staff standards, so looking at that expectation of what staff can expect from the organisation and what they can expect from us and what we can expect from them. The comments around reform on contractual changes as well, so that's not in my strategy 25 to 28, and that will happen nationally, but that's important into how we move forward in people in OD. From an apprenticeship perspective, we're well on our way with that, but there's a huge ask again in the 10-year plan around apprenticeships. Reinforcing local recruitment and not international recruitment, again we are on board with that, but that's not replicated in our plan. And then finally the leadership and management standards, which we have referenced in part of the leadership framework, so we will include some of that moving forward in our strategy. So this is our plan on a page, and I just really wanted to maybe flip to this slide. So the Train, Retain and Reform was a national drive where they asked people in OD departments to look at their strategy in those 3 sections, and I just really want to draw out some of the areas in there and hope that the board could see where we're going with that, and obviously this has been shared by the PCC committee as well. So flexible working is mentioned in there, and it's huge for us at the minute, and there's some discussions around our feedback on the staff survey, both locally and nationally. We are an exemplar site for flexible working, and we've done a lot in that space, and we've had regular updates to our sub-board committee. That said, there are still ways to go in flexible working, and we've had a really good session around what that actually means to us and to our staff, and moving forward with that. Reviewing the quality of appraisals. Nationally, the outcome from staff experience is that that's consistently low. Again, we've changed how we do our appraisals, but the quality still remains a concern for us. So that is absolutely part of our next 3 years, because there's a belief, and everyone will know my belief, that you can have a good quality conversation that's open and honest with your line manager. That is 99% there in terms of having that good working relationship and solving issues early on. We've included the trust values. We are actually going to have a little refresh of the values, and Ross and his team and I are working together on that, and really emphasising that around kindness and respect. And we feel we've lost a little bit of that over time. So that's a key part of the strategy going forward. And there'll be no surprises from board around health and wellbeing, and that's the 2% reduction in sickness absence. Alongside that, looking at the women's health strategy and supporting the mental health wellbeing of our staff. Mental health contributes to 40% of our current sickness absence. So again, there's a lot of information, lots of work going on to try and support our staff in those mental health issues. And then under the reform, I just wanted to pull out the use of automation data. So we've come a long way with our Power BI dashboards, where we now have really great data to understand where the position we are in as a service, and trying to move that forward with the use of AI and automation to make that even easier for us and be able to make those decisions. We had a good conversation yesterday around job evaluation, how to potentially start to use some of the automation to support that process moving forward. And lastly, around system working, so in relation to the Alliance, formed some great relationships over the last year with Alliance colleagues, and looking all the time at how we can share, how we can do things slightly differently and come together on a lot of our activities. So that's our strategy. I just wanted to end on these 3 areas. This came from VG's roadshows, and hopefully you can see as part of our strategy. So flexible working, feeling supported to make improvements, showing respect and kindness towards each other, and they're the 3 things we want staff to take away, and that forms part of our strategy as well. Thank you.
Katie, do you want to kick off any additionals?
Yeah, thank you. So as Kate said, it's gone through People and Culture Committee and has been delved into an awful lot. I think it's really great. A few things to pull out is we're developing the People and Culture Committee, so it will start to look at these themes. So rather than teams coming to do their presentation, we're going to be working on different themes as well to see how well integrated this is, which will be good. And also we want to ensure, and I believe this is coming through in the strategy, that we're focusing on the culture as well, not just people, but on culture and how we can continue to improve that. It's a great organisation for our culture, but there's always change and improvement that can be worked on.
Good. It feels a terrific piece of work, but I know it's gone through different iterations. Beatrice?
Yeah, just one quick question, Kate. Have you been able to explore under the appraisal domain what people's expectations and understanding of what an appraisal is about and should be about? And because I just wonder whether that has, not just for us locally, but even nationally, when you speak to staff, I'm not sure whether they always, everyone's view of what an appraisal should be is different.
So yes, we have, and actually it's live now in our local staff experience survey, where we are asking directly staff the question around appraisals and what they're expecting from appraisals. It's very dependent on the line manager and service lead as well, because and their skills and abilities to have that confident conversation and difficult conversations at times as well. So we're asking those questions now, hopefully we'll get some great feedback on that.
Any more for any more? Yes, Marion.
I just wondered if you feel that our staff understand the word flexible working, what that means to them.
I think it's a mix. I think they do, but I think when they're answering the survey, some staff potentially thinking wider than some areas that say you can leave 10 minutes early to pick your child up. That's flexible working. So that's why we're trying to think of a definition that can be organisation wide, that people can all relate to. And I think there's sometimes areas that try and support flexible work and they can't quite do it, and they come with a compromise. And you can understand staff's frustrations in that, but there's also the service that we need to provide. So the answer to your question is probably no, not all of them, and we need to do more work on it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we like this. I like the simplicity of the plan on the page. Glad that you're focusing on those areas where we know we've still got them to improve. Some of this must apply to us as well, showing respect and kindness towards each other. I think we're not bad at that, but even as a board, there's something to constantly remind ourselves of. So thank you very much indeed. Ready to move us on. And Mike, welcome to present the Guardian of Safe Working. And we seem to have a reduction in exception reports. I don't know if that's kind of a minor tweak, but that seems rather encouraging. Yeah, you want?
Hello. Hi. Yes, thanks for hosting me again. It seems like 5 minutes since I was last here. There we go. So I'm Mike Vincent, Guardian of Safe Working. This is the July report, last year in March. You're absolutely right, there has been a slight reduction this quarter in exception reports. So we've had 27 so far, and that was into the 7th of July. So not quite a full quarter, and we usually have 20 a month, which is 60-ish in a quarter. So it's about half we would expect, which has happened before, but not for a while, and it's not clear at all why. Feedback in drop-ins has been really positive, with everyone coming in and saying they haven't got any safe working issues. So whether this is a reflection of everyone getting away on time and us doing very well, I think it partly is that. I suspect it'll bounce up next quarter, and it's probably just a blip, but we'll see what happens. No change to the pattern, it's still mainly hours and rest, it's still mainly medicine, with a smattering through the surgical specialties, and I think we had one educational one so far this quarter, and that's not unusual. So that's what's happening with exceptions, the sort of usual thing to report back on in exceptions, and we'll keep an eye on that. The bigger thing for today's report really that I wanted to talk about was the impending revision to the exception reporting system. So this is something I wanted to make board aware of. I think I mentioned it last report, so we knew it was coming. And there has been a national agreement to revise the system. And what we knew was going to happen was there's going to be a bypass of the clinical supervisor, so that everything would go through HR or people, currently called. I think we just presented that was the change, which some of us I think thinks not a good change, but I think the driver for it is places in the country where there's a feeling that if your clinical supervisor finds out you're doing the exceptions, it will count against you. And I don't think that's something we see in Northumbria. We've done discouragement surveys that have been really positive. I think we'll probably repeat one soon. So we haven't done one for a while, but we showed little or no discouragement. So I think this is more the national driver rather than a local driver. And that was all we knew until about a month ago when we got some further information through. And it was a real shock because the revisions are more than we thought they were going to be. So there is this national agreement with an implementation date suggested of the 12th of September. Initially we were going to try and get this done by August, the changeover. But what we've had through is quite a lot of unexpected things, particularly around confidentiality. So not only are we not meant to involve the clinical supervisor in a meeting, we've got to devise a list of people who have access to the exception report data and then not breach to anyone else. And if we breach that, there's huge fines, well, huge, £250 per time fines. So if someone pressed the wrong button and sends 30 people the details of an exception, that would be 30 breaches. And that would be whatever, I can't do that maths, it's about £7,500 just with one. So we need to get this right. So we've had a couple of meetings with workforce and HR, and we need to get a workaround for this, because at the minute there is this implementation date. There's no operational detail being provided how we do this, and the allocate and if you did DRS, which is the other system, hasn't been revised in light of this revision, so there's no working electronic system. One of the things we have to do is make sure everyone's trained in how to do exceptions, which we already did, but they now have to do a dummy exception report within a week of starting at the trust. We don't currently have a system to do that because the current Allocate system doesn't work to do that. So we're looking at some workarounds. I think we can take the clinical supervisor bit out of the current system, so we'll do that. And we're going to aim to get things in place for the 12th of September, but it's going to be a real challenge. Speaking to regional colleagues, they're in absolutely the same position. In fact, they're behind where we're up to with it. I think there's a general feeling that this date will get pushed back, but as yet we've had nothing from NHS employers to clarify. Luckily, 12th of September is after changeover, so in a sense some of it won't apply because it'll be for the next changeover in February. So we've given up on trying for August. We're now waiting. We're going to try and get things in place for 12th of September, and I think we'll have probably as best we can, which will probably be better than a lot of other places. Whether we achieve full implementation on the 12th of September is a debate. I think we won't, but I also think that date is going to get pushed back. So I just wanted to make board aware. There's also things within it that the trainees can now choose to get paid rather than take time off. In the past, there was an emphasis that you took time off rather than payment. This has been pushed through by BMA and the residents themselves. But they have to stay within safe working bounds when they take the extra payment and do the extra work. And the rotas run so tight, there's not a lot of wriggle room for that, which is what we find when we try and get people to do locums. So that's going to be difficult. And doing this all and keeping it confidential is going to be a real challenge. You have to breach the confidentiality once someone takes time off, because their clinical supervisor has to be involved in getting safe time off. So it's all put this extra confidential bit in that you then don't follow through on. So I'm not sure where this came from and what the particular drivers were, but I think in a year's time we'll probably know a bit more, and we'll see what's happened nationally. I think the date will get pushed back, but it's very close, and strikes now in between. So sorry.
I guess it's just we had a good meeting at our joint local negotiating committee, which Jeremy and I sit on, and Mike as the chair of that. And we are working on it as a team, and I think the key to this is just about reasonableness. So we will work this out and we'll be as reasonable as we can within the bounds of what we can do, and I think we are working on that, and my workforce team are looking at how we can use the system, not fully because we don't have one, but in a way that will be reasonable, and we just need to comply or explain on that basis.
And I think that's Kate, and I think it's a huge lot of work, much more than we expected. So I think from a Guardian point of view and overseeing the implementation of the contract, it's very clear the Trust's taking this seriously. I think fines traditionally are levied by me, and I've got wriggle room on that. So if we do get to the 12th of September, we can look at how well we've done it, and I think I still levy the fines, but there's no detail as yet. They want us to report into here if we breach the confidentiality, so that will get added into the reports. We probably won't breach it, but it's just a bit. It was so unexpected, the emphasis that was put on confidentiality. I found very surprising, because perhaps we've just not had that as an issue where other places it has been. So I'll stop banging on about that to finish the rest, and then you can ask me some questions.
Is it on the same point, Simon? Come on in now on that.
Yeah.
Can you just turn yourself off, Mike?
Oh. So it is just to confirm how bizarre it seems. As a clinical supervisor, losing that ability for someone to say, "Oh, I saw you had you work late the other night, etc. How are you? What happened? Was it okay? What can we do differently?" It is just a really important part of the supervision. And if the confidentiality goes as far as they're not allowed to tell me, they went, it just goes way up. But what I will say, two bits. One, the protectionism bit for the board is the reason that most of the exception reports are in medicine is because medicine have most of the junior docs as well. It's not just that we treat them much worse than the surgeons do. And I think, without wanting to jinx it, I've already confessed my superstition, it is important for the board to hear that there has been a big investment. So we've had 15 extra F1s join us this year. In August, that'll become 15 extra F1s and 15 extra F2s. So we've increased the numbers around, which should help this idea of actually people getting away on time, because hopefully those times when they're just not, or it's really tight on the ward, hopefully have gone away because of the investment that we've made. Not just, and that was really an investment in training. That was, there are more doctors need to be training. Can you hold them in that training? And we said yes. So hopefully that's a benefit. I'll deny saying that when the figures go worse next time.
Right.
Well, I think the figure's going worse. There's an expectation that when this happens, the ERs will shoot up, because people, if you believe that the confidentiality was an issue, we should see that they go up when this changes. I'm not sure it will here, but that's what the expectation is nationally. And Simon's actually right, there are more in medicine to complicate rota systems, but we'll just have to wait and see. I think everything that's been being done to mitigate against this implementation is really positive as well, and shows the commitment to the contract. And obviously the complication out of the strikes is another separate issue. So I'll move on.
Speedily now, please.
Okay, there's 2 slides. The forum, some good news from the forum. Our last forum was really well attended, 32 residents. We were a bit worried that it had dipped down, the 13s weren't good, up to 32 last time. I missed half the meeting because I was stuck in clinic, so we might get even more next time. We have a public health fellow who co-chairs and does the chairing. She did a great job. So we had a really good resident doctor forum last time, and hopefully that will continue. And the only other thing I've popped up, there's no change to this slide. Our rotas are compliant, and the gaps that we have are well managed. We kept to a minimum because we're popular. So that's the other thing. We are popular with the residents who are coming here. And that's that.
Thank you. Right, thank you, that's terrific and really clear. The report for the first time includes information about use of locums, which seems to me to duplicate reporting that goes into other committees. Is that a statutory requirement that you report into us on locums now?
That's long-standing, it's on every report.
It's
the same table, and it's deliberately brief. When we first did it, we tried to do it in a bit more depth, but it then just, it didn't correlate with the actual proper figures.
Sorry. Any questions or comments to Mike? There's what looks like good news of reduction in exception reports, but I've always, in the past, whenever the figures go down, it's because it's good news we're doing something right, and whenever the figures go up, it's because we've improved the level of reporting. So I'm a bit of a cynic on this, and from the sound of it, this new system, we're just going to have to swallow and see what happens. So in 3 months' time, you might be coming back with a very different story, but as ever, we look forward to seeing you back. Thank you. Freedom to speak up, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. So for the Freedom to Speak Up dashboard, I'm presenting on behalf of Patrick and myself today. So the quarters that we bring to you are quarter 4 from the end of last financial year and quarter 1 for this year. We've done something a little bit different than the previous dashboard, so we've split so we can show you what we're finding is when we speak to staff that some cases are freedom to speak cases and some are actually staff wanting advice, guidance, etc. So we absolutely have a role as well. So we just thought that we would give people an indication of how those numbers split down. And when we look at our work from a staff group perspective, the highest proportion of cases come from our nurse and midwifery staff group, followed by our administrative and clerical. Overwhelmingly, the main theme that comes from the cases that staff raise are around worker safety and well-being, and I would say anecdotally from both mine and Patrick's perspective, it tends to be around relational, either inter-team relational, it may be relational around between the manager and the staff, but it tends to be those type of, that's the definition of safety within this dashboard. Picking up on culture, which we've talked about, I think reassuringly, our last dashboard was similar. I think there was just slightly more, but across these 2 quarters there was just one anonymous freedom to speak case, and that was fed back in the appropriate way to the department for which that case. And I think that the individual that made that would see, looking at the notes, would see that that was something was acted on from that, so that would hopefully give them some reassurance. Opportunities for learning. I think what we've listed there, what we find is we've had a couple of ones around organisational change, and what staff are talking to us about there is how well informed. So the timeliness of information, I think, is sometimes what can cause an issue for staff, and really understanding what's happening next, what does this mean, and absolutely making sure that cultural inclusion is part of every level of a business unit, a team, or day-to-day business for our staff. And we've already talked about it in Kate's presentation, but the importance of quality conversations, which is a crux, I think, to some of the things that we find around that, where we're talking about worker safety and those interrelational things. And I think the longer we do this role, we see very much the broader aspect of the freedom to speak up role is around not just those true cases, as you know, from mid-staffs and the recommendation for a freedom to speak up guardian in the NHS. It's a broader role than that. Sometimes it's just about that individual support, guidance of where to go, or just getting some information for people, or can I say just an ear to listen. And then there's the very practical stuff in terms of freedom to speak. The one last thing I'll point out is around detriments. So there's 2 aspects to detriments. So it's either self-reported, and that's where someone has experienced disadvantage as a result of speaking up, not of the case itself, so as a result of speaking up. So it either comes from the individual themselves through the survey where it's self-reported, or both Patrick and I, through the conversations that we have with the individual member of staff or staff, will be aware of that, and we will record it ourselves. So we record it in 2 aspects, from the individual or from ourselves, in terms of what we learn as we go through that process. And finally, we got 6 surveys back from the 17 cases that were closed across the 2 quarters, with some really good feedback in terms of the experience of staff who have had contact with either Patrick or myself.
So thanks very much indeed. Katie?
Thank you. We went through the dashboards in detail at the Culture Committee yesterday, which was a really useful discussion. We came out with a few actions from that. So in terms of the cases of detriment, we're looking to put a process in place. So retaining, obviously, the anonymity of the individual, we'll start to investigate what change is required to ensure we have that right process for looking through the detriments. And we're also going back to positive stories. There's a lot of brilliant change that's coming out of this. So again, it's starting to ensure we get that out into comms, so we're aware of the impact that freedom to speak up is having. It's a good position.
Thank you, and thanks, Jo. I just wanted to pick up on the second slide in terms of the general comments at the bottom, because I think that looks like that issue hasn't been resolved. And I guess it's just to assure board that sometimes in these things there's some perception and confidentiality issues as to why the individual will not know how something has fully been resolved. And we do try to give as much as possible, but that's not always, we don't always have that ability to do that. So we do pick up on these, and Jo and Andrew and I have quarterly meetings where we talk about themes and how we can close some of these loops. So just to provide that. And just to Katie's comment on the detriment, and we will look into that one case and look at the process of how we do that moving forward.
It probably doesn't need saying, but we probably just need to underline that no case of detriment is acceptable, and our position is really clear on that, so it's good that we're acting if we do have evidence of someone having suffered detriment. Any other comments or questions? This feels
Can I just add?
Yes.
Just to say to Jo and Patrick, the format of this report is really good now, because we've got some solid data there that we can unpick. It's very easy to read and then ones add up, and I think it's really good, the progress that's been made. I think in terms of all of the questions I think the board would normally want to ask, that it's kind of all in one place and easy to follow. just thank you for that.
And I agree with that. I think it's a terrifically clear presentation. It's so striking that Freedom to Speak Up has moved in a different direction to when it was first set up. So there was it 2 or 3 cases that could reflect on safety of patients as opposed to basically staff well-being. It was set up in response to the safety of patients' concerns. But if we're adapting the service to make sure that it's still functional, then that's really good news. That's right. Okay, yeah.
Apologies. It was just that some of the recommendations, Joe, around starting to promote the Speak Up service and looking at Speak Up ambassadors. So there's always the unknown, and it's how we can mitigate what we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. So we are putting some of those actions in place as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that people in culture are on this and are on the comms as well. So that's great. Good. Joe, still with you, the patient and staff stories. We're running a bit behind schedule at the moment, tomorrow.
So I'll just give the headlines and take them as read. I just would like to publicly thank the gentleman who has provided the story today for 2 reasons. One, in terms of his reflection of the care that he received by participating in the bowel screening programme, and then his reflection on the care and the treatments that he received in terms of the quality of the staff, the continuity of the care. A brilliant demonstration of our patient charter around having a point of contact and knowing who to go to when he talks about the helpline. But for me, with my cancer background in a recent role, just to really reinforce the importance of the uptake of the bowel screening programme, because he talks about his experience and actually that this probably may have saved his life. So I think in a public board, it's an excellent story to reinforce the importance of taking up the invitation for screening. So a fantastic experience that he describes, that continuity, as I say, the empathy and professionalism of staff. And then with 2 members of staff who reflect, one who works in the endoscopy department and another member of staff who's part of the bowel screening. They describe the pathway from beginning to end in terms of those patients who need further investigations and then go for an endoscopy. And they talk very much about their priority, their focus is absolutely patient-centred. Some of the challenges they face sometimes on a day-to-day basis with the normal things such as sickness that can cause staff shortages, but how they pull together, making sure that they're reaching the appropriate cancer targets. And that continual looking at how can we improve the service, how can we make it more efficient, how can we make it more patient-focused. So I thought there were 3 absolutely fantastic stories. And can I just say I sympathise with the dietary needs just before an endoscopy. I've been there.
Yeah. Great. Maria. Right, somebody else is on. Karen. Now you're on, Henry.
Thank you. Thanks for that report. Just a quick point about that story. I felt that it was a particularly eloquent way of getting everybody to engage with screening. It can be quite a worrying thing, quite a scary thing to think about having a colonoscopy for anybody, whether you know about it from the inside of the service or not. It can be quite off-putting. But the way it was described in this story makes it seem like almost a walk in the park, almost an enjoyable experience. Honestly, that's how it read, But I think that it is such a powerful way of getting people to engage and perhaps take some of that fear away. So you may find that people who read a story like this, if not this one, won't need a navigator to come into the service. I think it's an excellent story.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. Any more? Yeah, just Marion.
Thanks, Joe. I did really think it was really good. I just wondered if we could use that as well. There'll be a number of our staff that need help bowel cancer screening, particularly in that age group. And I was wondering how much we actually do for them, because sometimes it's scarier when you have a little bit of knowledge. And I just wondered if we could probably use that story in a different way.
I think that would be a great opportunity, because anything that encourages people to take up cancer screening invitations is positive, isn't it? I just wonder whether, with the gentleman's permission, we may share it regionally with the Alliance, because I think it would be great in terms of a tool for the Alliance to demonstrate, as Maria and yourself have described.
Great. Good. Well, that's terrific. Brace yourselves for next time, because we have a broad agreement that whilst there's positive news stories, we also make sure we have those that bring criticisms to our attention. So next time might not be quite so rosy, who knows. Flow us on to your next bit on the experience report. Not much new, not much change from last time, if that's fair.
Quite, it's a smaller and succinct report as well, Chair, just in terms of timing for us and data returns, etc. So just some headlines, I think, just from a inpatient, so our external provider, we saw a significant improvement in our rating score in May. No significant differences across day case and outpatients. We've seen consistent scoring for our rating score. Our emergency department in NSEC, we see that we do continue to be below the bottom 20%, but we have been in normal variation for the last 3 data points, so I think that's a positive. Our areas for focus continue to be around pain management and waiting. There is one there that we talked about in SQ&I, which was around, for the first time, we're seeing patients report about feeling threatened by other patients, so we're doing a deep dive into that in the waiting area and seeing what do we understand. And I'd say in the 3 years I've been in this role, that's the first time I've seen that, so we're going to have a look at that in some deeper analysis. In our real time for the emergency department, we've seen the best average rating score for the overall all the domains of 9.28 in this year. Again, area for focus continues to be pain management, but actually the last 3 scores for pain have been above the 2024 baseline score. So again, we're seeing a level of improvement there, and waiting continues to be an area for focus. If we look at our social media, our public domain data, so PEP Health, we have, for the first time for a few weeks now, we've pulled away to be above the regional score and above the national score, so back to where we were after a bit of sort of tracking our regional colleagues during the winter period, so we've moved away to have a slightly higher score. And our local staff survey, as we've already mentioned, is running at the moment, and our up-to-date response rate of this morning was 2,390, and I've just checked in this morning, we've got a full range of comms coming over the horizon for staff, just to encourage people to fill that in, particularly given the appraisal questions, etc., that we've talked about.
Very good, thank you. Who would like to chip in while we should be ready to receive this, encouraging not only the continued progress in some areas, but the clarity that's coming through on focusing on those areas where something new comes. So thank you to Safety and Quality for having dug into that. Ready to move on? We move on to the board walkabouts. We've got 3. The first one, Steve isn't here to present from the community nursing team. The report is good and clear. Marion, do you want to highlight anything, or ready to take it as read?
Yes, I think just take it read, it was a very good visit, I think, and I think you saw a lot of the differences in what can be improved and what the teams have done to improve things, but also the general communication and the working together with the huddles.
I think anybody want to raise up, particularly pleased to see the assurance that Steve felt he'd received, that there is still a focus on those vulnerable patients who are presenting such behavioural challenges to many of our staff. It's right that we protect our staff, but it's right that we have a key focus on their needs as well. And with that, apart from that, then let's move straight on. Katie, you had an interesting plan a while back.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I could talk about it all day, but it was a brilliant walkabout. We saw 3 great different units, and it was a real eye-opener. We talk an awful lot about our cancer targets, but just to actually get to see what was being done in a non-clinical perspective was excellent. Follows well from Joe's just patient story as well, particularly about the lung cancer screening team. And I think just to pull out of this, it's an example of where the trusts have worked together on this and pulling data from various GP practices. And it's just wonderful to see that engagement, particularly with the work that's going on to get out into the remote communities and engage. For example, they spoke about an ex-fisherman helping to get out and taking the NHS badge away from it and getting that communication for the fishermen. It's just lovely to hear. We then spent a lot of time with the cancer tracking team and went into detail on the Somerset system, which does an awful lot. It really does. There were a few sort of areas of concern that are picked up. You know, the team who are inputting the data are non-clinical, so to receive that information when it may not all make sense can be difficult to make sure we're getting the right data into Somerset. So there's the risk goes there. There's a lot of RPA work going on to help improve the efficiencies, and I think if we can push that to speed that up would be excellent. And again, there's more and more, it's often raised, but more and more coming through. So I think to get that surety that we've got the workforce in place for that going forward. One of the main concerns was at Newcastle. So at the moment, their system is read only. So it's manual data entry, which is slowing the process down. So I'm sure you'll probably pick up on that. And the last area we went to was the Oncology Day Unit, which has just gone through a lovely, well, it looked beautiful, Bright Charity had done an awful lot to the unit, and it was great. And just to see, even though it was very full, just the care and sensitivity that was being given to patients and relatives there was wonderful. We spoke a lot about, as well, the well-being of staff, having to cope with this every day and talking to relatives who are going through such difficult times. And it was lovely to see the peer-to-peer support that they get. So it was a wonderful walkabout.
Right, Dave.
Yeah, so just to reassure the board, the RPA process has a lot going on in cancer, and I think there's a process in place to decide on priority across the trust of all different
For the
things.
public, RPA?
Robotic process automation, so the automated entry of digital systems. So that's ongoing, and they are assessed on a monthly basis, and we put through whichever ones. There was 2 additional bodies put in that team last year to try and increase pace. So that is happening, and it will be delivered alongside some of the other priorities that are in there. I've raised the issue on the read-only bit because I think there's a bit more to it in terms of contemporaneous record from a record keeping point of view, and I think that's going through as well, but that's been raised as a hazard.
Good, thank you. Any other points arising out of Katie's visit? Richard, you're at Northumbria.
Yeah, this is Anslick. So this is the second stage of my wander around all the wards in Anslick. I'll get there by the end of the year. Quite an eye-opener. I was reflecting to Jeremy before we started that well, my hospital radio days, we used to love doing orthopaedics because you had all the younger, longer stay patients, which what Jeremy said, seatbelts put pay to that, and actually now the TNO ward is primarily older people, and it was very evident the number of level 3 false risks in the ward who were being very well supervised. The logistics issues of people from Southampton, the most recent case they quoted to us, who'd had an accident up here and then had to be repatriated to Southampton, and doing a non-trivial job for the ambulance crew that's got to take them down. So that was quite interesting. It was a difficult day staffing on the ward. I think the view from the team there was generally they were in a good place. Just everything seemed to have happened on the one day, and I guess that's the complexities of staffing an acute hospital, and it was interesting to see. What was also very notable were the number of anaesthetists racing around doing pain control. If I was ever in the TNO ward, I'd want to be reassured that they were there dealing with that. So that was, I think, very good. Ward 4 completely different, and that's why I think it's good to get around all of the wards. It was, it felt fairly calm. It was well staffed. People had time to talk, and some very difficult cases that they're looking after. And it, quite scary really if that, that does pick up the younger age range, not in a good place, either through alcohol addiction or through eating disorders, as well as the rest of the stuff that would go within Gastro's remit. The team there, I think, need a lot of emotional resilience because they must be incredibly difficult cases, and the support that they gave to each other was very evident, and I think it was a fascinating visit, absolutely fascinating.
Good. And very helpful, no kind of red flags flying either. Any points, or happy to receive? Good, I do enjoy receiving these reports. Now let's move into, we've got a couple of governance ones that I'm risking it by saying this might be a bit briefer. Regulation 17, Ross, anything you need to highlight for us? Oh, sorry.
No, it's just the usual assurance to say we're fully compliant. I think one thing to pull out really is the return of the sort of face-to-face engagement that talk about a lot, and we're maybe lost a little bit towards the digital end, but that's got to be a really good rhythm now with things like the Northumbria participation group, the Northumbria cafes we're doing regularly around the patch, and then if you, in the report you can see the drop-in sessions we've done right across the patch, from sort of Woody Bay right up to Berwick, so loads going on face-to-face, and great to hear the views of community groups and residents face-to-face.
Very encouraging. Are you ready to receive this? Yeah, good. And as Chris got, yes, you're at the end. It feels like a bit of a holding report, this one.
Indeed, yes. So, as you can see from the paper, and as board colleagues already know, we've been doing the process of speak to all the subcommittee board chairs and non-exec and exec chairs to revamp the BAF, which will come back to this board in September.
Can I just suggest as well, so Chris and I have been having a bit of a conversation offline about how I would propose that once Chris has gone, all of the BAF objectives, the new ones for 25-26 has gone through the various subcommittees, that we actually try and sign that off before September. I'm conscious of not wanting to leave our 25-26 BAF till September to board to sign off, whether we can bring it again in September to formalise that, but actually do that offline, online, and formalise it through an email conversation.
Would you be happy with us doing it that way? Colleagues looking around the room, nodding heads. Yeah, good. Okay, any other questions or comments to Chris? Thank you. Then we're into the section of items for noting from the board committee. So these are all areas that have been properly scrutinised within committees. This is by exception. And the first one then, nursing and midwifery, Marion? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. No, nothing really to highlight there. It's been through SQ&I, and I think we were, it's only May data we've got at the moment because of the timing, but certainly still challenges with flow across May, but a better IPC, so infection control position, and a reduced number of outbreaks. Sickness slightly higher, but we're monitoring that very carefully.
Do you have anything you want to add to that? Marion, you need to turn off.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, I don't do that. Go on. Somebody's still on. No, you're still on.
I have nothing to add, Chair, sorry.
I hate this system.
It's getting changed.
Come on now, I have nothing to add, Chair.
Quarterly maternity update.
Again,
There you go. That's it.
again, it's been through SQ&I, and the team are working through an action plan. Katie and Kate Carney are happy with that. Maria and I have spoken at length about it, as have Margaret and I, and we'll just work through that.
Maria?
Again, nothing to add.
Nothing to add, let's not do it. Don't worry then. Okay, and then we're on to Chris, the corporate safety and quality.
Yep, that one. Yeah. Just a couple of things just to update, Chair, because just the time of the report coming in and our submissions. So on the 18-week RTT position for June, that's finalised at 81.3%. So we've met plan, which is great. And the number of 52 weights is down to 15 from 19. We're still working through the cancer position, which has improved by 0.2, I think, so far. Just to update the board around ambulance handovers over 45 minutes. Those ones between 45 and 60. We've received that monthly information from NHS England yesterday in our monthly flow pack. So that was 47 patients were handed over, ambulance handovers between 45 and 60 minutes, and then 20 over 60 minutes. So in total it was 67 over 45 minutes. And then diagnostics is now confirmed at 99.5%.
Well, any measure of these are good. It's a good performance. Yeah. Any comments people want to make? But of course, it's gone through all the relevant committees. Yeah. Good. Then Paul, Finance.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This was discussed at the Finance Committee on Monday in some detail. Just to confirm what we're on target, our financial targets for this year.
Questions, comments? That's great. Then we're already into the review of the meeting. I must say this microphone system makes it means it doesn't flow so well. And anything you can just tell us about that?
I'm not. I'll just shout loud. So the way the speaker is going to get switched off like it was when it was first installed, so it'll return back to how it was previously.
Okay, because certainly as a chair I want to be able to speak at short notice without having to do all that.
Understood.
If nothing else we need to. Yeah. Good. How did it go as a meeting? Issues you haven't had the chance to say yet, you know what to say? Covered all the items, and thank you very much indeed. It gives us 5 minutes comfort break before private board starts.